Greetings everybody and welcome to the Blender 102 class for Tuesday, what is this, June the 26th I believe. In today's class we're going to be tackling the torso of our character and getting our image plane set up, getting some initial topology down. I do want, since this is the first class that we're actually going to be doing some modeling on our character, I want to make mention of a few ways, or just a few things about how this class is going to work. The first, wait for my tablet to realize that I'm trying to use it. The first is that we have some image planes that I want you to be sure to grab, and there's the addresses for those. I think Gav can probably paste the address for those over into BuzzNet if you still need that and you don't want to have to type it in by hand. Thank you, Gav. And just make sure that you have those because we will be loading those in and modeling from them. Now, those are hand-drawn image planes, so don't expect every single thing to line up 100% perfect. But I've done as good of a job on them as I think I can do, again, by hand. Now, a couple of other things. The modeling process. There is no step-by-step, put a vertex here, put another vertex there, connect this edge to that edge way to model. I don't model that way. I don't expect you to model that way. I want to say this early on. If you're following along with me in this class, I do not particularly care if you actually want to follow along with these image planes. If you have image planes of your own that you want to follow along with or use a different set and create an entirely different character, that's fine. You can totally take what I say and apply it to another character, but I do want you to work in tandem with me, which means I want whatever it is you model to be humanoid. So it needs to have a torso, 2 legs, 2 arms, hands and feet, preferably 5 fingers, etc. and so forth. Everything else will kind of, if you want to, you're welcome to branch out a little bit. But we need something quantifiable, so it needs to be human. Now,
organic?
Absolutely, organic. So just something that follows generally along with these lines. So again, something vaguely humanoid. But if you have some different image planes that you'd like to use, I appreciate it when people explore kind of outside the box. Now, you don't have to. If you just want to follow along with me, by all means follow along with me. Also, in that regard, my modeling process I consider to be very much on the fly. I tackle problems as they come up. I don't have a solid recipe for exactly where every vertex is going to be placed on a model, as I mentioned earlier. So you can't really expect me to model the same thing the same way 2 times in a row. Meaning if you watch today's session and then go on Thursday, jump in and watch it again, I may model things slightly differently. And there's no right or wrong way. It doesn't mean that today is right or that today is wrong and Thursday is right or wrong. It just means that when I'm sitting here slinging around vertices, sometimes my brain decides that I should run in a slightly different direction. And I believe you should be that level of flexible. You should be able to just watch me and kind of see the shapes that I'm making, and it's more about the mentality. So I would try to discourage you from making sure that your vertices are exactly where my vertices are. And if you think you're going to get frustrated in this process, be like, well, mine doesn't look exactly like Zach's, and now I don't know what to do. Chill. Take a deep breath, have a beverage of some sort, and just relax, because really it's about getting the shape down and then focusing on making your topology nice and clean. The workflow is what's more important to me. Yes, Gavin?
People are saying that the links for the image planes aren't working.
Somebody already said they got them.
2 people just said they didn't say that link isn't working. You do realize that was 2 links on a line, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, and then, so they are working. We have several people who've already managed to pull. Oh, it's Wolf Knightley. Well, I guess there you go. That's what it was. Okay, so yeah, make sure you realize that was 2 separate links and not just one. So anyway, I'm just going to be modeling. If you care to follow along while I do it, of course that's fine. If you just want to watch and ask questions, then that's fine as well, and you can do the modeling later on your own. Time. This class is going to run for around 2 hours. I'm willing to go over a bit, but of course I do have another class at 7 o'clock, so I can't just hang out forever. If, while I'm modeling, we don't really have enough time to finish absolutely everything that I want to finish on any given body part, this is of course on any given session, What I will have to do is probably finish that outside of class and then overview what I did for the next class. I can also, if it comes down to it, if there's a significant amount of work left to do, I am willing to schedule some open office sessions where you can join in and watch those, or I reserve the right, if I need to just record myself modeling, and it'll be released like a training video, kind of like a catch-up. But just understand that because of time constraints, I may not be able to just hang out here for hours and hours and hours to finish any given thing. So there you go. Okay, so with that, it's time for us to go ahead and start the modeling process. Now, I have some image planes that I have passed out to everybody, and I've got them already kind of squared away and lined up inside of Photoshop. So there's not going to be a whole lot of work to get these aligned inside of Blender, which was my goal. I wanted you guys to focus more on the Blender work and less on the actual process of getting your image planes all set up. If you need help building image planes, you're all member sponsors, and I do recommend you check out some of the Mastering Maya Advanced Digital Production videos. There's some really nice videos in there over concept art and making image planes that I think will get you all set up as you need to be. So we have a front view, we have a side view, and if you overlay the two, kind of like I've done here, you'll see that they actually line up pretty well for everything that we're going to need. Now I have those broken out into a couple of JPEGs. Let me go ahead and switch back over to the whiteboard and go ahead and jump into Blender. So here I am inside of a brand new scene in Blender. Now I am going to begin the modeling process as a box model. So this whole thing of having the default cube sitting in my Blender scene is going to be particularly useful to me. That's just personal preference. Now let's go ahead and get our scene set up. Step number the first, I'm going to press the N key, and I'll go ahead and turn on screencasting before I forget. So there you go. If you have questions about anything I'm doing, I'm usually pretty good about calling out what buttons I'm pressing, what tools I'm activating, etc. and so forth. But if you need clarification on anything, please don't be shy. That's why you're here. All right. So let's see, a couple of things. I don't really need much of this at the moment, so I'm just going to hit Control Up Arrow for just a second. And expand background images. We'll go ahead and turn those on and click Add Image. I'm going to click Open, and I've got to point myself to... that's a cool picture, but we really don't want to look at that. I'm going to point myself to where I have those images stored. So I'm just going to bring in the front and click Open Image, and I'm not even going to worry about anything else. Let's go ahead and click Add Image again, and click Open for the new one as well. And same thing, just navigate to wherever it is you saved those images to. Okay, so now you should have a front and a side image in place. Now, to get these properly set up, it's actually a pretty simple process. We need to decide what views we'll be able to see these on. We don't necessarily want to be able to see them in all views. So for the front image, it's pretty straightforward. Just set this to Y-axis front. For the side view, do Y-axis, I believe it's right that we're going to be using. And I usually double check anyway. So if you use your number pad, you will need to switch to an orthographic view. Now, I don't have auto orthographic set up, so when I jump to a side view, I still maintain my my perspective until I hit the 5 key on the numpad. I'm going to go ahead and just keep working that way, at least for a while. So here we are with the front, and this is breaking one of my favorite conventions, but I don't want to have to hold down Control and hit buttons, so I'm just going to deal with it. Generally, I like the Y-axis to be pointing back at me, but that's kind of a Blender thing. It generally doesn't work out very well for me to do that. So here we are with the front. You'll see the Y-axis is actually pointing toward where the back of the character will be, and then if we rotate to the side view, the X-axis is pointing back at us. Yes, Gavin? You want to say something?
I was just going to say you could set up the front and the back and the right and the left, but
I only have 2 images though, yeah.
No, I mean if you put the front and the back and your profile.
No, see, but then you got to hit Control-1 to flip around to the back and so forth.
This is true.
And to me, that's annoying. So I'm going to work like this, and then before I rig, if I want her to be facing down the axis, I'll just rotate her around because the modeling process is really flexible. So here you go. At this point, you've got your images nicely set up. Generally, I will model with X-ray on, so I'll just tap the Z key so that I can see through. And with this, we are ready to actually begin modeling. Now, I want to take just a second and reset everybody's ready status, and if you're following along with me, you need to do a couple of things. One, make sure that you hit the participate button up at the top of BuzzNet, which you should be logged into right now if you're listening to the sound of my voice. Also, once you get this set up and you are to this point where you have your image planes in place, please check ready. If you are not ready, don't leave yourself at not ready. Click 1 minute. Generally, the way I look at this is if I ask for a ready check and your status is still set to not ready, that means you're just not paying any attention to me right now because I have no way of really knowing if you're AFK at the moment. We're going to fix that at some point. But if I ever ask for a ready check and you're still working, just reach up and tap 1 minute. And I don't care if that means you need 1 minute or 5 minutes. It's just a way for me to know who's following along and who isn't. And it looks like everybody's pretty much there. I'm going to pause the video real quick while everybody sort of catches up. So there was a quick question about how to make sure that your images are showing, and if you don't see them, I mean generally you won't actually if you've done this right. So notice I've taken the front and I've set that to only follow the front. I've taken the side and I've set that to right, and what that means is to see the front, for instance, we need to look down the front. So I've hit 1 on the numpad, and then I'm just going to hit 5 to make sure I'm in an orthographic view, and then suddenly the image shows up. It will only show up in an orthographic view, which is good. You don't want to see it in other views. It'll just be confusing and it'll get in your way. Same with the side view. If we hit 3 to go to the right view, we'll suddenly see it unless we are in perspective, in which case it disappears. Again, though, that's very useful, and you want to keep it that way. All right, so with that out of the way, you should be ready to go ahead and begin modeling. I'll jump out and make sure that we are in perspective view for just a minute. Now, here's how I generally will set up a box model, especially for a character. And I do this for guys and girls, even though the first thing we're going to model looks quite a bit like a corset. I'm going to jump into edit mode and hit Control-R, and then just click right-click. And what that does, that just puts a split right down the center of the box. I mean, of course, you can do this when you make a box, but I prefer to do it this way. Now, once you have that, Control-Tab-F to switch to faces, and then I want you to just wipe out all of these faces. If you're looking down the axis, so basically take a look at my axes in the lower left-hand corner. So if you're looking down the y-axis, it's not if the axis is pointing in the same direction you're looking, and then I'm grabbing all of the faces on the left-hand side, tap X and delete faces, and that'll just chop your cube in half. Now, once you've done that, you also want to take the top and the bottom faces and nuke those out as well. Once you've done that, it's time for us to add a couple of modifiers, and the cool thing is after this we can pretty much put everything away but the viewport for a little while. So go ahead and click on your modifier panel, and I want you to start off by adding a mirror modifier. Also make sure that clipping is turned on. Now, if you've set everything up correctly up to this point, you should automatically get the other half of your box. Now, if you're building in another axis for some silly reason, then your mirror probably didn't work correctly. So make sure that you have your image plane set up to the appropriate directions, etc., and so forth, and that you cut the proper side of your box off. Are you back, Gavin?
I am. I was just going to say, and depending on what size of model you're making and whether you're modeling at real scale, just make sure your merge limit is sufficiently low that you're not going to start losing detail that you think you've put in.
Right. And
not that I've done that recently at all.
Yeah. Now, I mean, generally, if you haven't moved your box, if it was still at the center of the world, then that all becomes much, much easier. But if it wasn't for some reason, then Gav is absolutely right. I would just start by making sure my box was back at the origin before I did anything. All right. So now we've got that done. Another modifier that we can go ahead and throw on is, not under constraints, but under modifiers, we have subdivision surface. We can go ahead and put that on, and I generally will have two subdivisions in the view. Now, this is a little bit rounded, but I'm going to hit Control-Tab-E and switch to edges. I'm going to grab this edge at the outer front and slide it back a bit, and grab this edge at the outer back and slide it forward slightly less. This will be the front, and this will be the back. And if you don't make this, I mean, if you do this kind of equally on both sides, it's not the end of the world. I just know that generally there's more rounding on our tummies than there is on our backs. So I'll pull this edge forward just a little bit less. But it's so early on that that's not really a clincher by any means. Okay, so with that done, we're ready to get to the real crux of modeling, which is just slinging around some vertices. This is where, and I'm just going to give you a warning, I will often get kind of quiet. I don't know how many of you out there have ever watched any of my modeling on the fly videos, but sometimes I do kind of forget to speak because I'm just kind of slinging some verts around. And the thing about modeling to me is really, it's just moving a bunch of vertices. So sometimes I will banter or just ramble, but I will try to keep in touch with what exactly I am doing. But you'll get the hang of it. We've got a lot of modeling to go through before this class is over. I also want to point this out. This is just a personal preference. If you go under user preferences, I am a big proponent of, under editing, turning on release confirms. It just means one less click that I have to worry about. So I can just grab vertices and drag them around. I find that to be a nice fast way to model. For me, this really speeds up my modeling process, and it makes me feel really at one with my polygon surfaces. Now, that's totally, your mileage may vary. You may not like this setting at all, but I just thought I'd mention it. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on from here. Yes, Lozo, we see you. So let's go ahead and start at the front view, and I'll hit Control-Tab-V, and what I'm going to do is just start up here at the front and start pulling these vertices. Actually, you know what? Let me undo that. Let's start at the side. I'm going to do this a lot. I'm going to be kind of jumping around. And what I'm going to do is grab this piece of geometry that we've defined here and just pull it up around our character's waist. Not quite like a belt. In fact, right now it looks more like a skirt than anything else.
Yeah, it's nice. A-line skirt from the 70s. It should be denim.
Uh-huh.
With shoulder straps.
And then we'll just grab these 4 verts and we'll pull these up. Now, it's never too early to focus on your topological flow. So let's just focus on the side view for a moment. So what I'm going to do is, notice I'm placing these vertices right on the drawing. Now what is that going to do to my, my smooth version? And naturally the smooth version is going to stay inside. It's going to stay really, really small and kind of crushed in. Do not stress about that right away. The reason I say that is that your subdivision surface will always make for a smaller surface. Things are going to shrink down. You know that going in. But right now we've only got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 edges on this side of the object. We're going to be adding a lot more. The more edges we add, the more that shape is going to start to fill out. So don't worry so much about trying to get your smooth version to line up with the drawing. You'll just get frustrated. When you first begin, just put your cage right on the drawing, and then if later on you need to kind of pull things out just a little bit here and there as you get closer to being done, then do that. I think you'll find that'll be a lot easier on you. So what you want really is for this to look kind of like a waist belt or something that you would wrap around your character's waist. So you can kind of see how that geometry is lining up. And you notice we're starting to get kind of a little bit of an arch over the hip. That is going to help us, and that form will follow as we move all the way down the hip, and it'll give us a nice natural flow to our topology. Once we have that, we can flip around to the front view, and obviously this is not exactly what we want. So I'm going to hit Control-Tab-E, and I'm going to grab edges. Let's start with this edge here. And that's not exactly the edge that I want. Let's see, if I rotate the view slightly, I can grab exactly the one I want. And I'll just slide this straight in. Now notice I didn't stop it right out here at the outside edge. I'm going to pull it in just a little ways. This one I will stop a little closer to the outer edge. And you can really see how that inner surface is getting a little crushed. Again, don't stress about that. Now let's switch over to vertices now, and we'll put just a little bit of a flare in this direction. Maybe slide this forward a little bit. Never, ever, ever allow yourself to get stuck just looking in your front and side views. It's real easy to do, especially when you get started. But all the time, you should be rotating around and jump out into perspective and just see what things look like. If you need to, tap Z and shade up your view for just a second. It just keeps your brain anchored with the shape of your 3D surface, and that's really, really important.
Can I ask a question?
You can. I don't know if I'll answer you. You can ask.
Well, yeah, normally at this point, this is me using normally to mean twice, I would put the midpoint edge in down the side.
The midpoint edge? Oh, I mean, I suppose you can.
I was just wondering, because you're obviously still working with the three first initial faces.
You mean put like an edge here?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can, and there's really no reason not to. We're just going to go a little bit more slowly than that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you were asking me if it's okay to think that way, absolutely, that's fantastical. But we don't really.
You know me. That's not what I was asking.
Yeah.
I was going, why haven't you put that in the side yet?
I know. So what we're going to do though is we're going to build in this direction, and then we'll start worrying about how much detail we have. So here's one of the things I love about Blender is that you can do this. We can just hit E to extrude and just automatically get like our next shape, and it almost works perfectly just like that. In fact, in the front view, that's really not half bad. We do need to switch over to the side view though, and we have a little bit of work to do. So I hit Control-Tab-V and just start shaping this out. Now, this is one of those areas where, just me personally, for whatever it's worth to you, I think that ladies, and this is true even if you're modeling a guy, ladies or guys who have girlfriends have a little bit of an advantage, because what we're doing basically is we're building the shape of a corset or a bustier just to define the shape of the torso. Now, if you're unfamiliar with these pieces of garment, then this will be a little bit different to you. Then you can just think we're making a tube which wraps around the torso. But the cool thing about thinking of it like a bustier is, or a corset, is a lot of those, if you've ever seen one, they have a nice sort of curvature that will flow kind of up the back, and it'll go right under the breast line and that sort of thing. And really, that defines a very nice topological flow for a torso. So that's kind of the direction we're heading. So you can use that sort of thing to your advantage.
Well, it touches on a wider point, which is that if you actually, if you're modeling a human model, or any humanoid character, for the most part, it's going to end up clothed anyway. But whether it is or not, if you actually look at the way clothes are put together,
yeah,
that's a very good hint in terms of the topology that you should be looking at. Think about the way a shirt is put together. You've got the seams that go around the arms, and you've got the seams along the top of the shoulders. And I suppose partly because I've got a house full of patterns, because my mum used to be a seamstress.
Right.
But yeah, it's a good way to think about awkward shapes, particularly around. Basically, what I'm saying is go and get a pair of pants,
cut them to ribbons,
and see how they're put together.
All right. So I've got another row of vertices that I've now extruded out from the bottom. I'm just pulling these out. Notice I'm keeping these a little close together here at the sides, because I know that when I rotate around here to the front, I'm going to have to pull these out and start creating a little bit of that flare for the hips.
Deep Freeze asked a question, which is I don't quite get why we are conforming the cage to the drawing instead of the surface.
As I mentioned, and you're actually about to see this here in just a moment, as we add more edges to the cage, the inner surface is going to get pulled out farther and farther. Now, will it ever completely touch? No, it won't. But if we start out modeling by pulling this surface all the way to the edge, we will constantly be pushing it back in the whole time we work. So in short, what I'm saying is it's way too early to stress that surface. As a matter of fact, if you find it distracting, just turn it off and don't worry about it. I kind of like to keep an eye on it, but that's just a personal preference. You don't have to have it at all. On that regard, we can also, in that regard, I don't need my timeline, so I'll close that, but I'll leave the modifier list open for now in case I need to open and close and hide stuff. And I can probably put that away for the time being, and I know I can put that away for the time being, and then we can just have a great big viewport to work with. Now, in that regard, what I was saying earlier about the cage getting pulled closer and closer, we can go ahead and start shaping some things now. Now, granted, all we have is a front view and a side view. So in some cases, we need to take some of the things that we know about human anatomy, or even if you don't know them, you may need to go look at pictures. I am going to make a point not to do a lot of web browsing on this class because we are kind of tight on time. But here's what I'm going to do is rotate around here to the back, and I'll go ahead and shade things up so you can see a little bit better. And we're going to start by adding one edge right here to the back. Now, as soon as you add an edge, I recommend you give it a little bit of importance. By default, that edge is just going to be in a perfectly straight line, and it's just going to cause some flattening. So I'll go ahead and pull this out to create a little bit of rounding. And we will end up needing more than this. We're going to end up needing some edges closer to the spine so we can define some indentation along the spine. Now, Gavin was already saying, why don't we have an edge here on the side? And you certainly can. In fact, now might be a good time to go ahead and put that in. So we'll go just hit Control-R and drop one of those in. we'll pull this out. Now this probably means we're going to have to start shifting detail and sliding this edge a little bit inward along the surface. But I don't want to add too much too quickly. So let's just take a look at our front and our side views and just see what we've got going on here with our edges. Now for now, because we have so much detail showing, I will go ahead and hide my cage, or hide my actual subdivision surface. And notice all I'm doing right now is I'm just looking for areas where we had straight lines from adding in those surfaces and making sure I've just got kind of a nicer flow for everything. Make sure we take a look at the front. We can pull this in, but I probably will need another edge on the belly, so I can probably add that from here, and that'll be okay. Just need to make sure that we rotate around here. I'll give that a little bit of leverage in this direction. Jump to the side view, and let's just start pulling some verts. So we know that tummy is going to flatten out a little bit. Now that's probably all of the detail that we want to add in this direction for the time being, and it'd probably be good for us now to just kind of continue moving along the body. So, this is where I get to get you guys just a little bit involved. What do you say? Do we go up or down? I'll get the class involved. I heard down first, so we'll go ahead and start modeling down first. Because really, as far as I'm concerned, there's no right or wrong answer. You can really move in either direction from this point. So let's start by going down. So I'll just grab this bottommost edge, and I love this feature, just extrude, and notice, because we have clipping on, you can just pull that out nicely. And if you want, you can go all the way down to about where the hips start. Now, I guess I will in this case. I can always add more detail later.
But I often like to, when I'm doing the extrude stage like that, I will sort of go one past where I intended to.
Yeah,
and then come back and fill the intermediate.
All right, you can add more detail.
Sort of do them every other one and then fill in.
Now, again, you'll notice that I've got kind of like it's almost like a bikini line taking place here, and we can definitely use that as an indication of where certain vertices need to go. However, it's not completely flawless. I mean, ideally, we'd have more vertices to line things up. What that tells me is that we need more detail, but I don't want to add it too quickly. So, I'm going to take some of these points that we're creating here at the belly and start to kind of flatten these out, horizontally speaking. And now we're going to just kind of create the front part of the crotch just by grabbing a single edge. So Control-Tab-E and grab this edge. Let's rotate back around to the front. And notice I don't have the entire loop. Right now I'm just working with this one edge and this one edge only. And we'll just hit E and extrude that down. Just go all the way down to the bottom. Hit Control-Tab-V to grab vertices, and we'll line this up in the front view. Now, we need to jump back and focus on the side view for a minute because we haven't looked at it in a moment. We already have a few issues. One, her backside, obviously. Now, you'll notice that what I just did there, I did not pull straight back. You can. I like to try to keep my edge flow kind of riding high up across the bottom. I just find that by doing that, I end up with a few extra edges by the time I wrap all the way around, so that later on when I'm animating, if she has to lift her leg up, I still have enough vertices to maintain some volume and keep some shape. Now, you can overdo it. I know I said this earlier in the last class, and it still holds just as true right now. You probably won't be completely at one with how much detail you really need in a given area until you have modeled, rigged, and animated at least a character or two. I know that may sound like it's way off in the future, and that might frustrate you, but until you've done that, until you've seen how those deformations work and how your deformation is dependent on decisions made at the geometry stage, I don't really expect you to really know that. Okay, now there's some light traced lines here where I was kind of roughing out the shape with an underdrawing, and those allow us to kind of give it an idea of how the shape of the torso, especially right around the crotch area, is kind of curving backward. Now, in the front view, we should be down already to the base of the crotch, and we know just because the way human beings work, whether you're male or female. The base of the crotch is generally pretty far back, so we're going to pull this back just a little bit, and we can add more detail to that later. Now, also, as I look up, take a look at your edge flow. We're running nicely down the back, and then suddenly, we're going forward for some reason. That's a problem. So make sure you're keeping an eye on that flow, and make sure that everything feels very natural.
Always make sure that if you're adding in and this comes back to what Zach was saying about when you add an edge loop, move it, essentially. If you've got vertices there, and particularly at this stage, make sure that they are actually serving a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be
quite easy to add in, more detail work because you need it at the front of a model, and then kind of forget that. Well, that loop goes all the way around to the back.
Oh, I've seen so many people. Yeah, they'll be like, "Oh, well, I need a whole bunch of edges here for later," and then they add them, but they don't do anything with them. So, only add them when you're really sure you need them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just kind of pause for a second, give folks a moment to sort of catch up. Of course, if you have questions, ask away. Continue. Okay, so I think we're ready to pretty much continue here. Now, again, we don't have views of everything that we really need, and just me personally, I find that a lot of my modeling projects have just a front view and a side view, and that's pretty much it. And yes, my caps lock is on, if that makes you feel any better. Now, if you have a lot of views, I totally recommend if you're getting into a super hardcore character, and this is really, I'm considering this to be your first character. We went from 101, which was a little bouncing ball with a golf club, to a character. So I'm not really worried about super in-depth details of hardcore anatomy class. Nevertheless, if you want to go look up a whole bunch of photos of anatomy and use those as a way to figure out where vertices should flow, I completely support that, and that's great. Now, Deep Freeze asked, and please, if you have official questions, I would ask that you pop them over into the webinar system so I don't lose them, but he said, do you model with smooth off in general? I go back and forth. Sometimes I'll have it on so that I can see where the surface is lying. As we get more and more detail in, at some point that will become more important to me. And then sometimes I'll switch it off because I feel like it's in my way. So I go back and forth a lot. I'm going to add an extra edge. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm just going to cancel that. Ignore me. I'm going to move this, though. I don't really like... You see how this vertex is just kind of flying out here to the side? I'm going to kind of soften that up a little bit. And then let's come over here to the side view. Gav, if you're not talking, could you mute, please?
Sorry, thought I had.
No worries. Just hearing that air hiss. And I'm going to start rounding out some of these lines that are flowing down our character's side. Now, let's put a little bit of care into the detail that's kind of going across her hip and around her bottom. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to start here and just put an edge loop in this direction. And we'll jump to the side view, the front view, pardon me. And make sure we're vertices, and let's just start with this vertex. I'll pull it out slightly. I also would need to make sure that in the side view I clean this up a little bit so we have a little bit of rounding here. This is just me, I'm going to hit Control Space and get that gizmo out of my way. I'm going to right click and put the 3D cursor way out of my way. So just moving stuff around. Let's also hit Z so I can see through my shape a little bit. Okay, and this is looking pretty good. I'm going to angle this up just a little bit more and pull it up a little bit higher. Then switch over to edges, and I want basically all of these edges, but I don't want these ones that go in through here. So really all the ones that go across her hip and around her back. And I'm going to extrude these out like so. Go ahead and switch over to vertices and start shaping in this direction. Now we can start having our edges sweep backwards a little bit. If you ignore the fact there's a leg attached to this, then the body has this sort of curvature where from the shoulder we curve backwards like an S-curve. If you ever get into human anatomy, particularly for drawing or for any sort of artistic work, including 3D modeling, look for S-curves. They're one of the most beautiful aspects of the human body, and they're everywhere. But here's one. It goes from the shoulder, we go back, and then we go forward at the small of the back, and then we sweep back one more time as we go across the bottom. And so I'm just kind of starting to reflect that. And that's looking pretty good. Now, of course, we need to check this out from the front view as well, and we can see that we need to kind of clean up the hips. Again, for now, I'm just putting the cage right on the surface. And I'm going to start pulling some of these edges up a little bit. We need to get these merged, so I'll select the two, Alt-M, center will be fine. They're pretty close to where they need to be in any case. I'm going to tuck these in a little bit so we get a nice flare out as we approach the location of the hips. And then I'll pull this out just a little bit as well. We're starting to get kind of a nice start for where her hips are going to become her backside. So let's Control-Tab-E and switch to edges. I'm going to grab these two edges instead of just one. Now that's going to, I know that that's going to lead to kind of an interesting change of geometry because I have two edges here that are going to need to basically merge with one here in just a moment. Now, in many cases, that will give me pause. In fact, it just did. So, I mean, I know I could split this and run another edge up through here. I don't really think I want to do that. So for now, let me just grab one edge. I can always split it off later. I'm a big fan, as you guys might have seen in the previous video, of just getting some geometry in place and then making it look nice later. So with this one edge, I'm just going to hit E to extrude, E and extrude again, E and extrude again, and then E and extrude again and pull this really up close to the front. Looks horrible, doesn't it? I mean, it's kind of supposed to, but, that's okay. Now, let's switch to vertices and grab U and Alt-M, and we'll do that at last. Grab this one, and Shift-R to repeat. I don't know why I just tried to merge there, unless I had a really weird selection. So U, Alt-M at last. Okay, that's good. And now we can just kind of start narrowing this down. And really, what you're doing is you're kind of modeling the shape of a leotard at this point. So you've gone from a corset to a leotard as we continue with our analogy for making clothing. Now, if we take a look in the front view, we've gone way down underneath the base of the crotch here, so we know that these will need to come up quite a bit.
Unless you're modeling MC Hammer.
Which we clearly aren't. Now, let's see here. I'm going to pull some of this back a little bit. We have, I'm trying to conform as best I can to the shape of how we seem to be flowing into her bottom. We may have a slight discrepancy in the image planes here, though, because we're not seeing her, the base of her crotch get down any lower, but that's one of those things that I'm not going to stress too much right now. It's way too early. Now, so we get back here. Obviously, this is not a very bottom-like look that we've got going on here. So I'm going to take these vertices and start to pull them back a little bit. We will be creating a little bit of cleavage for her rump, so we can pull some of these vertices forward a little bit, kind of preemptively, but always in my case, that's always kind of might be a little too soon to do that sort of thing. I'm going to start straightening out some of the directions these edges are going, because we have some that are really close together right here, and I'm going to start kind of spacing them out a little more evenly. A lot of my modeling process is tiny little tweaks. What is another word for crotch? I don't know. The base of her legs, or there's probably a bunch of them, actually. But I'll probably just stick to using crotch because it's one that I know and everybody recognizes.
And it's broadcastable.
It's broadcastable. Groin's another good one. Yeah, go ahead.
What's the hotkey for going through your proportional editing modes?
Oh? And you can hit Shift-O to go through the different types of curves, but O turns it on and off. Now, I often need to click on it to actually set it to connected.
Alt-O to do that.
Alt-O? Okay.
Yeah, that's the one I was after.
Oh, okay.
Alt-O.
Yeah, Alt-O is connected.
But I'm actually more paranoid in Blender than probably any other program about just hitting buttons and to find out what they do. In that way of, I wonder what that button does. I haven't pressed it before.
All right, well,
but Blender, anything could happen.
Apparently, my use of the word crotch is freaking some people out, so I'll switch over to groin. But, everybody's got different opinions as to what they'll say in any given circumstance. So, all right, now we've got this much kind of set up and looking pretty good. Let's see, I'm just going to kind of back out. Let's go ahead and leave this area, and I'm going to start working my way up for a little while. So we've already gone downward. Let's now move in the other direction. Oh, we're still very PC, guys. Very, very PC. Okay, so now, let's just start with a side view and make sure we can see through. I'll go ahead and turn off this for now. Let's extrude. And I'll put this directly underneath the line for the breast and just start shaping. Now, notice something here. I'm kind of leaving a little bit of a curvature that is going to go underneath the breast, and then we'll just run the rest right up the back. So again, kind of like that bustier form I was talking about earlier.
NATO's going to be so sad he's not here.
Yeah, probably. Now, the chest is going to flatten out a little bit. It's one of those things that you really probably only realize that happens if you're looking at a 3/4 view. So we're going to take some of these vertices and pull them forward a bit to get some flattening in the chest so that our chest doesn't start to get all pointy, which it's already kind of sort of doing. Now you can take a look at your smooth, and you'll notice we are getting a lot closer to that drawing now. It's still not perfect, and not to jump around too much, but we can grab these and kind of pull them back out. Alright. Okay, so moving along through here, the next thing I would probably do is just start out by creating the general shape from which we're going to be sculpting out her breasts. Now, this particular character is not. She's kind of. We're modeling her as if she was wearing a unitard, so we're not going to have a lot of cleavage or separation in between the breasts. It's actually going to be like when you're wearing kind of a one-piece suit, and it becomes almost a single extrusion across the front. Maybe a little bit of an indentation in between the breasts, but that'll be about it. So let's switch over to edges. And I'm just going to grab these two edges, which as you can see they're placed pretty much directly underneath. We'll extrude those up pretty much to about halfway because we're going to be adding more detail as we go. And click, and then we'll extrude again and put this right on up to the shoulder. And you can see kind of sort of what that does. Now, that done, let's kind of do the same thing here at the back. Now, we probably are going to end up needing more detail in this direction, one way or another. So, what I'm going to do here, and this is just kind of an artistic decision right off the cuff, is I'm going to switch over to vertices. I'm going to grab... Actually, let me grab edges. I think this might work a little better for what I have in mind. Maybe. We'll see in a minute. Let me hit Control E. Let me do an edge slide. I'm going to pull these over a little bit, and then I'll add a new edge right in here. And I'll just slide this out just a little ways. That's not perfect, and I do have some shaping I need to do on the back, and we'll take a look at that shortly. But this gives me two nice edges back here where I can start doing kind of the same thing and shaping out the way the back is going to flow. So let's jump back over to the side view, and we'll extrude this up once, and then up again to the shoulder, and then you can kind of see where we're going from this point. So I'm going to extrude once across the side, and scale this only in the Y direction. You see how that's kind of straightening it out and pointing it back toward us, which is kind of nice, really. And of course, we have a couple of different options here. I mean, I'm old school, so I'll just make a quick extrusion, jump over to Vertices, and Alt-M to merge those to each other.
Now, without getting ahead of things... But
I already know. Aren't you going to leave a hole for the head?
No.
No? What are you going to say? I wanted to cut you off. Because you kind of cut me off.
Really?
Go ahead. What you got?
Oh, I was anticipating a full stop, you see. No, counting the number of edges around the armholes and so forth.
Are we making an arm right now?
Well, you know why I'm asking.
No, I don't.
Because of the number of edges that you have around, and just sort of thinking about evenness and oddness and...
Oh, no, it's way too early for that.
Up.
It's way too early for that. Right now, there's nothing to join. Now, later on, once we get the form a little bit more ironed out, once we have, I mean, this doesn't even look like a human being very much right now. We have so much to do right up here in this area that our number of details is going to change a lot. Now, and really what I want to do is get the basis of the form in place. Then we can start worrying about making it look good. Then, later on, we'll start making an arm, and only at that point will I be like, all right, how many edges do we have? Do I need to control, adjust? Because sometimes... when you're making a character, to get just the form you need, you can't think that far ahead. Sometimes you'll have an arm that is so crazy detailed going into a simple shoulder that it doesn't make sense to send that many edges all the way up to the shoulder, and you'll be finding ways to anchor them off. So I don't like to think that far ahead, especially when you're just getting the initial shapes in. So anyway, now that I've beaten that horse thoroughly into the ground, let's hit Control-R, and I'm going to drop in an edge here. Let's go to the side view, and just hit G. I'll pull this out. Start kind of pulling these out a little bit as well. Let me go ahead and hide this. And so, moving a few things. And we probably won't even get all of the detail work in place. Some of the nice details around the neck and the throat probably won't be achievable until we get a head in place. Same thing with the arm. We won't be able to get the shoulder looking just right or the hip looking just right until we're making an arm or a leg. So it's a building process. And I know that's like a horrible sort of pun to use when you're modeling something, but that's really what it's like. Okay, now let me see here. I'm trying to avoid running into too many triangles too early, but if I was to grab... let's take a look at the front view and see what we have. So we're right about halfway along the breast here. Of course, we haven't really cleaned this up, and we need to. This should be kind of out here. This, which I need to kind of confirm what it is I'm looking at. Yeah, you can see that should be kind of underneath the breast. So that means that I need to kind of pull it out wide here, which now means that all of these need to kind of come out as well to get nice topological flow. So we could go ahead and use these to help sort of get the outer shape of the breast. Again, remembering that we have very, very low resolution geometry right now. So if you're already getting frustrated and you're like, oh, but this just looks so chunky and blocky, my answer is yes, of course it does. And it will for just a little while. But in that sense, we have, if we're going to pull these all out to the outer edge, the next row in could be used to kind of help define the center. Now, our topology starts doing something interesting there. You'll notice how it starts widening out. I wouldn't stress about that. We need that to happen. The shape is itself kind of widening out and kind of expanding horizontally speaking from that angle. So that should generally be okay for us. Now, let's see. The next thing I would do probably, because again I'm just roughing in shapes right now. We can do an extrusion. Switch over to vertices. Grab here and here and merge to last here and here. And start off by merging to last. Whether I keep that is something that we'll just have to see here in just a little while. But obviously we don't have much control over that edge. We need some more control, but we need it in a lot of different directions. So we just have like this one little like chisel pointy shape, and obviously that needs to be much more rounded. So for now I'm going to hit Control-R and drop in some detail in this direction. And we can just move this out a little bit, and I won't worry about the indentation between the breasts just now. We'll get there. In fact, I'll pull this up because we have a little bit of a kind of a rounded spot and then flattening, almost like she's wearing a sports bra. And we can utilize that and kind of leverage that right away, which is very cool. All right, so that's definitely coming in a little more cleanly, a little more clearly even. This I'm not too keen about, and it's basically how we are getting so indented already right here at this point. I think it's just a little bit too soon, and obviously you can tell if you go to the front view that's not really looking right. So I'm going to grab this vertex and pull it out a little bit. And I just feel like this is, like I need another edge that's just wrapping around here and moving in this direction. So I'm just going to make it for now. I'm just going to get the knife tool and just go cut, cut. Now that just made a triangle. Am I going to stress that right now? No, it's too early to stress that. We can clean that sort of stuff up later as we get closer to forming where the arm is going to be coming in and that sort of thing. You do kind of want to make a mental note of it, though. You don't want to forget about that sort of thing. Of course, when you make decisions like that, know that you will have to clean them up later. And we can also take a look at our smooth model and see how that's kind of coming along. Yeah, I wouldn't stress a triangle this early in the game for people who are already stressing. Now, let's see here. We can go ahead and start narrowing down where the shoulder is going to kind of come into the mix. So let's take a look at the front view. We need a hole for the head at some point. I don't really want to worry about it right now, but we could. We could jump over to here, Control-Tab F, just grab these two faces and just nuke them for now. And that's good enough for a start. That'll at least get us kind of warmed up. And jump back over to Vertices. And now we can kind of start thinning these out, pull this out across the shoulder so it's more like the sleeve of a tank top. I'll pull this down a little bit, jump over to the side view. It looks like that could also stand to come forward. I can't see through the shape, so I need to grab that and pull it out. Pull this down, pull this down. Also pull this down a little bit. Okay, let's go ahead and start, I can go ahead and solve that triangle, I suppose. Let's go ahead and just jump over to faces, and I'll solve it with a hammer. I love solving problems with a hammer whenever I can, so we'll just go ahead and break it out of there. And we'll go kind of systematically around the edge. So I'm going to jump over to edges, extrude these guys out, switch over to vertices, and just weld these two together. Alt-M and center or last should be just as good. And I think now would be a pretty good time to kind of pause and give folks a moment to sort of catch up. Again, if you have questions or something, please just let me know. Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of move along. We're just kind of working our way around the shoulder here. We've got a pretty nice approach, I think, for the side of the breast and where that's going to kind of mold into the shoulder. Now, I will just kind of give you sort of a heads up. We can go ahead and start kind of forming where the armpit will go, or how that will form into the top of the shoulder. But I mean, if you're just getting started, if you're just kind of modeling out a character for the first time, I'd probably advise you not to stress that too much at the moment. We'll get there. So let me start up here at the top, and I can grab all of these edges and just extrude them out a little bit. Again, I've got some vertices to merge right away, so I can just Alt-M and at center those. I know I'm going to be moving stuff around, so I don't mind the fact that at center is going to do some pretty wild things. I have an edge here that, to me, is sticking out a little bit far, and it may not be. It's just I'm seeing a little bit of a point there in the rib cage, so I'm going to pull this back. Now, I understand that this means I may need to check the front view and make some adjustments, but I feel like I need to start making adjustments using more than just those vertices. So maybe start pulling the next row forward out a little bit. There's just a few tweaks in that direction. Just to keep the back of the ribcage from getting as pointy as it was trying to get there. So now I can grab these two edges, Alt-M, and just merge those together. And that's looking pretty nice. Let's see here. We can also, if I go ahead and shade this up, maybe I don't know really which way it's easier for you guys to visualize, but I realize there's just a lot of work in visualizing a 3D shape while someone's working on it. So I do appreciate your patience. Let me see about just extruding this. I don't know if this is going to work or if I'm going to keep it, but you know. Grab these two and merge at last. Grab this guy, same thing. Now, obviously, that's a real stretch for geometry, and I normally wouldn't want to keep that, and I don't want to keep that. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and make a triangle, and I'm knowingly going to make a triangle that I'm probably going to keep for a while, because for me, this is a pretty common area to have a triangle or two, particularly on ladies, where you have to kind of blend down from what is a large pectoral area into something else. We've basically got two shapes that are coming together. So I'm going to leave, temporarily speaking, this triangle kind of here in place. I think I'm also going to edge slide a little bit. So let's jump over to edges. Control E and do a slide and pull this way down to about here. And then I'm just going to start kind of smoothing this out. It is kind of an interesting transition. But, and really, in my case, the way I'm looking at it is just, it's kind of a place to start.
Good.
Yes, Gavin?
You see, I joined that face, the top face of your triangle, directly up across to the side of the bosom at the front, and then split that. And
that is indeed what we may end up doing. Absolutely. But I'm not really all that stressed about that right now. Now I do have a big opening here. I'm going to insert just a little bit of detail. Jump over to the side.
I've told you, stop referring to me as a big opening.
But you give me so many opportunities.
Yeah.
Let's see, something probably close to what Gavin was talking about, though it may not be the same thing. No two people really model exactly alike. We can extrude this out and switch over to vertices, do a merge here, and a merge here. And then we could probably just take the knife tool and just split across here.
Yeah.
And then that gives us some more detail to work with, but it gives us some other things we can do as well. So, for instance, we can go ahead and pull this up, start using this edge to take on some of the workload where that one was previously. I still wouldn't mind maybe creating a triangle in here to add a little more detail in this area, but I'm not going to rush into that. I mean, in that regard, we could just make a split that goes all the way around the front of the bosom if we really had to.
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. But then, as you know, I'm pathologically disposed against ever using a triangle.
Yeah. And, I don't think you need to necessarily fear triangles.
You're more sensible than that.
Yeah, I don't think you don't need to fear triangles that staunchly, because at some point you're just slowing down your workflow, especially during the modeling stage. Now, if you want to take a pass of your modeling when you're done and start finding, just systematically hunting down triangles and solving them out into different shapes, by all means do that. But I think when you're working and you're just getting your initial shapes in place, I really wouldn't put so much stress into it. I think you're just slowing yourself down.
As it goes, I entirely agree with your assessment of that. It's just, I simply can't. This is why I spend more time programming. But it's why I decided quite early on that there's no way I could model professionally.
Mm.
It's not that I can't model, it's I would never finish.
If you are moving center vertices and you're getting some splits, you'll notice that you need to make sure that clipping is activated in your mirror modifier. See, with that off, I can do this and make holes. With that on, when I slam these together, they'll lock and they'll get stuck there at the center axis, which is good. Okay, so I probably need to kind of get away from this area a little bit. I'm going to start pulling some of this detail back inward a ways, because you'll notice I'm kind of stretching the polygons out here, and I don't really want to do that this early on into the game. I know I'm going to need some more detail here down the center of the chest. But, see, because I've added this extra detail, I can start bringing that over and allowing it to do some of this work. Pretty nice shape for the shoulder. Also a good time to go ahead and start checking our orthographic views.
Probably a good time for people following along to hit Control S.
Including me, actually.
I just thought of it because although there's no real rhyme or reason to my blue screens, they seem to happen obviously more frequently when I've got, well, like now Blender and GoToWebinar and everything open.
Right. Okay, so I think we've got a pretty good start up to the shoulder. Obviously, we can use different amounts of detail to kind of iron out how we're going to transition to the arm. I don't want you to stress about that too much right now. We can take what's going on here at the chest and start to pull that back just a little bit. I feel like we're probably going to need some more detail to help achieve everything that I want to do. And there's a couple of different ways we can go about that. I feel like this particular bit of detail needs to kind of be routed back inward, or I may need to do some edge slides. I'm trying to avoid the density of running an edge all the way down through here, but I acknowledge that that may be the best approach. Yes, Gavin?
Well, yeah. I'm not happy with my earlier suggestion now.
Which earlier suggestion?
About how to fill that, how to get rid of that triangle.
Oh,
if you would send that up over the top and come to the third row down and chop in there, it would, yeah.
Yeah, you're just confusing folks now.
I'll go back to my wing.
Alright, so I made a little bit more space there. Now, I know, watch this, if we hit Control R, that's going to wrap all the way around to the back. So you have to kind of watch out, because things are bound to get a little bit cramped here. So I'll start spreading things out over here as well. Now, if you're wondering, why aren't you just using edge slide? It's just me. I just kind of like feeling where the vertices are going. I feel a bit more like a sculptor if I take the time to kind of wiggle some verts around. It's an artistic process, so even though you might be thinking, well, there's certainly more. I don't even want to dare use words like efficient, but there are tools, fitted to a certain purpose. If those tools don't let you feel like you're really at one with your geometry, then you might be leading yourself into more hassle than anything else. So I'll go ahead and insert an edge here, and this is going to do a few different jobs. It's going to allow me to start rounding out the neck a little bit. It'll allow me to start getting some nicer indentation at the center of the bosom area, which is very cool. Let me start pulling the center bit up just a little. We can go and start pulling this out, so we're kind of spacing things out a little more evenly across the surface. Again, watching our topology flow as we go. Bye, Filbert.
Heinrich has a good question. He said, are points where more than 4 quads meet as bad as triangles?
No, they can be. It's so situationally dependent. I mean, if it's an area that is deforming a lot, then yeah, that can be really problematic. It depends on the type of deformation you need. In the middle of a flat spot on the body, sometimes they just kind of happen. They will happen probably quite a bit when you have like an arm that has to attach to a torso or a neck that has to attach, etc. and so forth. But that's mathematically speaking, it's bound to happen somewhere. And in a lot of cases, you'll just have to work with them.
It's a question of, finding the place where they're helpful rather than hindering. And then
out for now.
And then trying to
or in some cases it's also just finding the places where they do the least bit of damage.
Yeah.
Where is this going to hurt you the least, and that's where it ends up going. Alright, now, let's do a couple of things here. If I pull this back, and pull this up a little bit as well. I mean, that's still a little bit extreme right in there. I feel like I keep wanting to soften that up a little bit, but I mean, there is a very sharp change in geometry. And again, like right here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 faces that are meeting, but take a look at what we've really got. We have the tube of the torso with the extrusion of the bosom right there at that point. I mean, it's a major change in direction for the surface, so it's going to happen. I've spent a long time in the perspective view here, so I need to take a moment and see what my orthographics look like, see how the topology is flowing along those images. See, this allows you to see little funny areas like this, where the vertices need to be kind of cleaned up a little bit. Now, we've also been going for about an hour, so I'm going to stop this video here in just a moment, and we will take a quick break. I probably won't be giving it a full 10 minutes. Just something for you to stand up, stretch legs, get drinks, so that we can reconvene and continue. Are edge loops important in topology running around your model? They will be. The more you work, I think you're going to find it's just impossible to get away from them. And they will help with a lot of forms of deformation. So yeah, I would say they're important. And when you're just starting out, you probably have to watch out for spiraling edge loops. You'll hit Control-R to insert an edge loop, and it'll end up going down the back and then wrapping around the leg and spiraling all the way around. I've done that several times when I was first getting into modeling. So if you do that, you'd be like, oh, this must be what Zach was talking about. Okay, I'm having to kind of fight the urge to keep going here, so I think now I'm going to force myself to take a quick break. So go ahead and hit Control-S if you haven't, and I'll go ahead and stop this video, give it a moment to save, and then just after a few minutes we'll go ahead and get started again.